Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Hinge was my go-to. I know. Dating apps are a total minefield. But out of all of them, Hinge seemed the least gross, you know? Like it was supposed to be designed to be deleted and all that jazz, which, looking back, is actually pretty ironic. Anyway, I was 23, living in a small college town, and honestly, just bored. I had a good group of friends, but the dating scene was lacking. So, I did what any self-respecting millennial would do. I downloaded an app. And yeah, I swiped. A lot. I wasn't looking for anything super serious. Just someone to grab a beer with, maybe watch a movie. You get the idea. I wanted someone fun and normal, which, apparently, is a lot to ask for on these apps. Most of the guys were either trying way too hard or couldn't hold a conversation to save their lives. But then there was Liam. His profile was actually pretty funny. He had these witty answers to the prompts, and his pictures were all candid. Like he hadn't spent hours posing in front of a mirror. He seemed genuinely cool, and he was cute, so I sent him a like. We matched pretty much instantly, and the conversation flowed super easily. He was sarcastic and quick-witted, and we had a ton in common. We talked about everything from our favorite movies to our most embarrassing childhood moments. After a week or so of chatting, he suggested we meet up. I was a little hesitant at first, but I figured, what the heck? We decided to meet at a coffee shop downtown. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was actually kind of excited. I spent way too long trying to decide what to wear, finally settling on a pair of jeans and a comfy sweater. I wanted to look cute, but also casual, like I hadn't tried too hard. When I got to the coffee shop, he was already there, waiting at a table by the window. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He had this easy smile and these kind eyes, and I instantly felt at ease. We talked for hours that afternoon. We talked about our families, our dreams, our fears. It felt like I had known him forever, even though we had just met. It was honestly one of the best first dates I had ever been on. We started seeing each other pretty regularly after that. We went to movies, concerts, and even took a weekend trip to a nearby city. He was funny, smart, and genuinely caring. He always listened when I talked, and he made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I was falling for him, hard. He was charming, considerate, and seemed almost too good to be true. After a couple of months, things started to get more serious. We started spending more and more time at each other's places. I started leaving little things at his apartment, and he started doing the same at mine. We were basically living together without actually living together. Then things started to shift. Subtle things, at first, easy to ignore. He started getting weirdly possessive. Little comments here and there, disguised as jokes, about how I should only hang out with him, or about how other guys were checking me out. I brushed it off at first, telling myself he was just being protective. But then it started to escalate. He started questioning me about where I was going, who I was with. He would text me constantly when I was out with my friends, demanding to know what I was doing. One night, I went out to dinner with my girlfriends. I told him where I was going, but he still texted me every 5 minutes. Finally, I turned my phone off. When I got home, he was waiting for me outside my apartment. He was furious. He accused me of ignoring him, of lying to him, of being with another guy. I tried to explain that I was just having dinner with my friends, but he wouldn't listen. He kept yelling and screaming, his face red with anger. I had never seen him like this before. I was terrified. It ended with him storming off, but the seed of doubt was planted. After that, things just kept getting worse. He started showing up unannounced at my work. He would call me dozens of times a day, leaving angry voicemails if I didn't answer. He started accusing me of cheating on him, even though I had done nothing wrong. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would just get defensive and turn the blame back on me. I felt trapped, suffocated. I wanted to end things, but I was scared of what he might do. I never felt unsafe until that moment when I realized that the person I had fallen in love with was a completely different person than who he really was. One evening, I was at his apartment, packing up my things. I had finally decided to leave him, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. He came home unexpectedly while I was packing. He saw what I was doing, and his face turned white. He started yelling at me, begging me to stay. He grabbed my arm, and his grip was so tight that it hurt. I told him to let go, but he wouldn't. He pulled me closer to him, and I could feel his breath on my face. "You can't leave me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I love you too much." I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. He held me tighter, his grip tightening on my arm. I started to panic. I was trapped, and I didn't know what to do. Then, he did something that I will never forget. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. He held it to my throat, his eyes filled with tears. "If I can't have you, then no one can," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I was terrified. I thought I was going to die. I stood there, frozen in fear, staring into his eyes, waiting for the end. But then something changed. His expression softened, and the tears started to flow. He slowly lowered the knife, his hand trembling. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I didn't mean to. I would never hurt you." He dropped the knife on the floor and collapsed to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, watching him, my body trembling with fear. After a few minutes, I finally managed to break free. I ran out of the apartment and didn't stop running until I got back to my place. I called the police, and they arrested him later that night. He was charged with assault and terrorizing behavior. I testified against him in court, and he was found guilty. He's in prison now, and hopefully he will be for a long time. I still have nightmares about that night. I'm still scared of dating apps, and I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to trust someone again. I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the people you meet online are not who they seem to be. And sometimes, the person you think you know can turn into your worst nightmare. I got so lucky to walk out of that situation. I should have trusted my instincts when I saw his profile. Looking back, the signs were all there, like neon flashing lights pointing straight at danger zone. But I was young, bored, and maybe a little too optimistic about the whole online dating thing. Hinge, specifically. I'd downloaded it after my last relationship imploded, hoping to find someone normal. You know, someone who liked hiking and pizza and didn't have a collection of taxidermied squirrels in their apartment. Anyway, his name was Alex, and his profile seemed promising enough. A couple of decent-looking pictures, one of him smiling awkwardly at a friend's wedding, another of him hiking score, and one of him volunteering at an animal shelter double score. His prompts were all pretty standard. I am looking for someone who can make me laugh. My simple pleasures are coffee and bookstores. Dating me is like getting a really good hug. Harmless, right? I swipe right. He swiped right, and we started chatting. The conversations were easy, flowing. We talked about our favorite movies, our families, our jobs. He was a graphic designer, which seemed cool and creative. He said he liked to cook and was always trying out new recipes. He even sent me pictures of some of his creations. Homemade pasta, fancy-looking salads, stuff like that. I was starting to think, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally found a normal, decent guy on a dating app. Famous last words, I guess. We made plans to meet up for coffee the following Saturday. I picked a cafe near my apartment, a place I felt comfortable and safe. I even told my roommate, Sarah, where I was going and who I was meeting, just in case. I wore a simple dress and tried not to look like I was trying too hard. I got there a few minutes early and snagged a table near the window. I was nervous, but also excited. This could be the start of something good, I thought. Then Alex showed up. He looked different than his pictures. Not drastically different, but off. His hair was messy, his clothes were rumpled, and his eyes seemed intense. Like he was staring right through me. But I brushed it off. Maybe he was just nervous too. We ordered our coffees and started talking. At first, things were fine. We chatted about our jobs and our hobbies, just like we had online. But then, the conversation started to take a weird turn. He started asking me really personal questions, like how much money I made, what my parents did for a living, and what kind of car I drove. It felt like he was trying to size me up, to figure out if I was worth his time. Then he started talking about his ex-girlfriend. He went on and on about how she had wronged him, how she had betrayed him, and how he would never trust another woman again. It was uncomfortable and off-putting. I tried to change the subject, but he kept steering it back to his ex. He seemed obsessed with her, with the pain she had caused him. It was clear that he was over her, and it made me wonder why he was even on Hinge in the first place. As the coffee date progressed, Alex started to get increasingly agitated. He fidgeted in his seat, tapped his fingers on the table, and kept glancing around the cafe like he was expecting someone to attack him. He started whispering things under his breath, things I couldn't quite make out. It was starting to freak me out. I decided I'd had enough. I told him I had to go, that I had another appointment. He didn't seem to believe me. He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't leave," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We're just getting started." I yanked my hand away and stood up. "I really have to go," I said, trying to sound firm. He glared at me, his eyes filled with anger. "You just like all the others," he muttered. "You all the same." I turned and walked out of the cafe as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I ran all the way home, locked my door, and collapsed on my couch. I felt shaken and violated. I couldn't believe I had almost let myself get involved with someone like that. I spent the rest of the day replaying the coffee date in my head, trying to figure out what I had missed, what red flags I had ignored. And then the texts started. At first, they were just a few harmless messages, asking if I had made it home okay. But then, they started to get more frequent and more intense. He texted me dozens of times a day, asking where I was, what I was doing, and who I was with. He started sending me pictures of things he thought I would like, flowers, sunsets, random objects he found on the street. It was overwhelming and suffocating that I blocked his number, but that didn't stop him. He started creating fake profiles on Hinge and messaging me from those accounts. He would say things like, "I know it's you," or "I am watching you," or "We're meant to be together." It was terrifying that I reported him to Hinge, but they didn't seem to take it seriously. They said they would investigate, but the fake profiles kept coming. I felt helpless and vulnerable that I started to see him everywhere. I would catch glimpses of him in the street, in the grocery store, in the park. I couldn't be sure it was him, but it always felt like him. That same intense stare, that same unsettling energy. I started to become paranoid. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was watching me. I stopped going out alone. I asked Sarah to walk with me to the bus stop and to come with me to the grocery store. I felt like I was living in a horror movie. One night, I woke up to a noise outside my window. I peeked through the blinds and saw a figure standing in the shadows across the street. It was too dark to see his face, but I knew it was him. He was just standing there, staring at my apartment building that I called the police. But by the time they arrived, he was gone. They took a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he actually threatened me or broke into my apartment. That I felt completely alone and unprotected. I knew I had to do something. The next day, I went to the police station and filed a restraining order against Alex. It was a long and complicated process, but I finally got it. The restraining order prohibited him from contacting me or coming within a certain distance of my home or workplace. That I hoped it would be enough. For a while, it seemed like it was. The text stopped, the fake profiles disappeared, and I didn't see him anymore. I started to relax, to feel like I could finally breathe again. But then, a few weeks later, I came home from work and found a package on my doorstep. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before picking it up. I had a bad feeling about it. I took the box inside and set it on my kitchen table. I slowly opened it, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a single object, a taxidermied squirrel. Its eyes were missing. That was it. I moved. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Sarah. I changed my number, deleted my social media accounts, and started a new life in a new city. I still think about Alex sometimes. I wonder where he is and what he's doing. I hope he hasn't found anyone else to torment. I hope he gets the help he needs. But most of all, I hope I never see him again that I should have trusted my instincts when I saw that squirrel on his profile. Next. Okay, so, you know how you sometimes get this weird feeling in the pit of your stomach? Like something is seriously off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Yeah, that's how my whole thing with Liam started. It's probably going to be hard to believe, but I met him on Hinge. I know. Dating apps can be a total train wreck. But I was bored one summer after graduating from high school, and my friend insisted it was the only way to meet people outside of my usual friend group. So I caved and downloaded it. My profile was pretty basic. A couple of pictures of me smiling awkwardly at different events, a short bio about how I loved hiking and binge-watching documentaries, and the usual prompts like, my simple pleasures, and I'm looking for. I wasn't expecting much, honestly. Just maybe a few decent conversations and some new people to follow on Instagram. Then Liam messaged me. His profile was, way more artsy than mine. He had all these moody black and white pictures of him staring off into the distance, and his bio was some cryptic quote about finding beauty in the mundane. It was all a bit much, but something about it was also intriguing. I was drawn to the whole mysterious vibe. I'll admit that his profile was unique, so I went for it. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly witty. He made me laugh, and he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He didn't hit on me right away or send any weird messages. It actually felt like a normal conversation, which was refreshing. After a week or so of talking online, we decided to meet up for coffee. The cafe was in this quirky part of town with vintage stores and hole-in-the-wall restaurants. I arrived a few minutes early and snagged a table near the window, trying to act cool while secretly being super nervous. When Liam walked in, I was immediately relieved. He looked even better in person than in his pictures. He had this intense gaze and a kind smile that seemed to crinkle at the corners of his eyes. He had a vintage style. The coffee date went well. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told me about his dream of becoming a filmmaker, and I found it very interesting. I told him about my plans to travel before starting college. We laughed, we debated, and we even discovered that we both had a weird obsession with true crime podcasts. By the end of the date, I was totally smitten. Over the next few weeks, Liam and I became inseparable. We went on hikes, explored abandoned buildings, which, in hindsight, was kind of sketchy, and had late-night talks under the stars. He always knew how to make me laugh, and he made me feel like I was the only person in the world. He was charming, intelligent, and incredibly attentive. I felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood me. That's where things started to go wrong, slowly. It started with the little things. He would get jealous if I talked about other guys, even if it was just a casual mention of a friend from school. He would constantly text me to see what I was doing and who I was with. At first, I thought it was sweet that he cared so much, but it quickly became suffocating. Then there were the weird comments. He would say things like, "You're so beautiful. I can't believe you're with me." Or, "I'm so lucky to have you. Don't ever leave me." They seemed innocent enough at the time, but they had this unsettling undercurrent of desperation. He had these random bursts of anger, like he would get annoyed at the slightest things. One time, we were at a restaurant, and the waiter accidentally spilled water on his shirt. Liam completely lost it, yelling at the poor guy and making a huge scene. I was so embarrassed that I wanted to crawl under the table. He apologized later, saying that he was just stressed out, but it left me feeling uneasy. I tried to get him to see a therapist, but he refused. The biggest red flag was his obsession with my location. He would always ask me where I was going, who I was going with, and when I would be back. He even started showing up unannounced at places where I told him I would be. One time, I was hanging out with my friends at the park, and he just showed up out of nowhere, acting like it was no big deal. I was freaked out. He kept saying he just wanted to surprise me. Things came to a head one night when I was at a party with my friends. Liam had said he was busy, so I went without him. Around midnight, he called me, sounding drunk. He asked me where I was, and I told him. Then he started yelling at me, accusing me of lying and cheating on him. I tried to explain that I was just hanging out with my friends, but he wouldn't listen. He showed up at the party 20 minutes later, stumbling and slurring his words. He grabbed my arm and started dragging me outside, demanding that I come home with him. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. My friends intervened, and they managed to get him to leave. I was shaken up, embarrassed, and completely done. I went back to the party. The next day, I broke up with him over the phone. He didn't take it well. He started crying and begging me to reconsider. He promised he would change, that he would be a better boyfriend. I stood firm. I told him it was over. Then the calls and texts escalated. He would call me at all hours of the night, leaving voicemails where he would cry, scream, and threaten to hurt himself. I blocked his number, but he started creating fake profiles on social media to message me. He would send me long, rambling messages about how much he loved me and how he couldn't live without me. It was terrifying. I felt like I was being stalked. I eventually had to get a restraining order against him. It was a long and stressful process, but it was worth it for my peace of mind. He finally left me alone. The police served him at his residence. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I ignored. I was young and blinded by infatuation. I wanted to believe that Liam was the perfect guy, even when he was showing me that he wasn't. I learned a hard lesson about trusting my instincts and paying attention to warning signs. I still use dating apps sometimes, but I'm much more cautious now. I take my time getting to know people, and I don't ignore the red flags, no matter how charming they seem. It's just not worth the risk. The situation with Liam ended as quickly as it started. It was probably the worst summer of my life. Let me tell you about this thing that happened. It started with a Hinge profile, like they all do, right? I wasn't even really looking for anything serious, just bored on a Friday night, swiping through potential matches while I was supposed to be studying for my history final. You know how it goes. Procrastination at its finest. Anyway, this girl, Sarah, pops up. Pretty. Yeah, but not like influencer level pretty. More like cute girl next door pretty. The kind you could actually imagine having a conversation with. Her profile was kind of funny too. Not just the same old wanderlust and coffee garbage. She had a question about what fictional world you want to live in and why. And her answer was something about wanting to be a hobbit because she loved second breakfast. It was dumb, but it made me laugh, so I swiped right. We matched almost instantly, which, looking back, should have been my first clue. Like, who's on Hinge that fast? But I was too busy being stoked that a cute girl thought I was swipe-worthy. We started chatting, and honestly, it was easy. Like, we had the same sense of humor, the same taste in music, even the same obscure obsession with old cartoons. We texted for a few days, and it felt different. Not in a lovey-dovey way, but in a holy crap, I actually like talking to this person kind of way. So, naturally, we made plans to meet up. She suggested this little hole-in-the-wall pizza place near campus. Said it was her favorite. I was down. It was a Tuesday night, kinda rainy, but I was actually excited. I hadn't felt this way about meeting someone from an app in forever. I even put on a decent shirt, which is saying something for me. The pizza place was exactly what she described. Small, kinda grimy, but with amazing pizza. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth in the back. She looked even better in person, her hair kinda messy, wearing a band tee and jeans. She smiled when she saw me, and I swear, my heart did a little flip. We ordered a pizza, and the conversation just flowed. We talked about everything, our families, our friends, our dreams for the future. It felt like I'd known her forever. After pizza, we walked around campus for a bit, even though it was raining. We ended up sitting under this big oak tree, talking and laughing until it started getting really late. I walked her back to her dorm, and we hugged goodnight. It was a perfect first date. Cheesy, I know. The next few weeks were a blur. We started hanging out all the time, going to movies, concerts, even just studying together in the library. I was totally smitten. I hadn't felt this happy in a long time. She met my friends, and they loved her. Everything felt right. But then, things started to get weird. It started small. Little things that I probably should have noticed sooner. She was always asking about my schedule, what time I left for class, when I'd be home. At first, I thought she was just being thoughtful, wanting to know when I was free to hang out. But then it started to feel obsessive. She would text me constantly when I was at work, asking what I was doing, who I was talking to. If I didn't respond fast enough, she'd get upset. It was like she needed to know my every move. Then she began showing up at places when she knew I was there, but I hadn't told her. The library, the coffee shop. That one was really weird. I'm studying for finals, and out of nowhere, she sat at my table. It felt weird and off. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe she was just really into me. But the feeling in the back of my head and the pit of my stomach just wouldn't go away. I just couldn't shrug it off. This felt really wrong. One night, I was at my friend Mark's apartment playing video games. I hadn't told Sarah I was going. I just needed some time to chill with my friends without feeling like I was being watched. Around 11 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Mark opened it, and there was Sarah, standing in the hallway, looking furious. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. I was stunned. "How did you know I was here?" She just glared at me. "I know everything about you." That's when the pieces started to fall into place. All the little things, the obsessive texts, the constant questions, the showing up unannounced. She wasn't just into me. She was stalking me. I told her to leave, and she did, but not before giving me this look that I'll never forget. It was like pure hatred, like I had betrayed her in some way. I didn't sleep that night. I was too freaked out. The next day, I decided to do some digging. I started with her Hinge profile. It was gone, vanished, like it never existed. That's when I got really scared. I went to the university's records office and asked about her. I gave them her name, her date of birth, everything I knew. They couldn't find anything. No student by that name. No record of her ever attending the university. It was like she was a ghost. I spent the next few days trying to figure out who she was, where she came from, what she wanted. I checked social media, searched online databases, even hired a private investigator. Nothing. It was like she didn't exist. Then, one evening, I was going through some old photos on my computer when I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of my mom from high school. In the background, standing behind her, was Sarah. Except it wasn't Sarah. It was a woman who looked exactly like her, but older, maybe in her 40s or 50s. I zoomed in on the picture, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman was staring directly at the camera, with the same cold, empty eyes that Sarah had. It was like she was looking right through me. I showed the picture to my mom, and she gasped. She said she remembered the woman in the picture. Her name was Evelyn, and she was a strange, reclusive girl who had moved to town during her senior year. She didn't have any friends, and she always seemed to be watching people. My mom had also said that after a brief appearance at high school, she just disappeared. My mom said that Evelyn had a crush on her boyfriend and seemed to follow him wherever he went, and after she was told to stop, she moved, never to be seen again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had a feeling I was being watched, and the strange scratching from the walls wouldn't go away. I knew that Sarah, or Evelyn, or whoever she was still out there, and she was getting closer. I contacted the police, showed them the picture, told them everything that had happened. They were skeptical, but they agreed to investigate. They found Evelyn, but she was dead. She had passed away due to natural causes in her home. I don't know who the girl I matched with was, but her motive must be more sinister than I initially thought. The only thing that I do know is that she isn't finished with me. I saw her at my mom's wake, dressed in black, standing in the back, and she stared at me with the same hate that I had seen before, but this time she smirked. I didn't realize the danger I was in until I got involved with Hinge. Now I have to live with the fear that I'm the next target. Next. Okay, so, picture this, me sprawled on my bed, scrolling through Hinge for what felt like the millionth time that week. I was bored out of my skull. Summer vacation was dragging on forever, and every other app felt like a wasteland of fake profiles and guys who only wanted one thing. Hinge, with its most compatible algorithm, was supposed to be different, right? Supposed to be a curated selection of guys who actually had something in common with me. Not just a picture I found attractive. That's how I matched with Liam. His profile was, actually funny. No shirtless gym selfies. No, looking for my partner in crime cliches. Just a few pics of him hiking, reading, and one of him dressed as a giant banana for Halloween. His prompts were witty. We had a few shared interests: indie movies, obscure podcasts, a mutual hatred for pineapple on pizza, and the conversation flowed pretty easily. We talked for almost 2 weeks before deciding to meet up, which, looking back, should have been a major red flag. I usually meet up with guys way sooner, but something about Liam made me want to take things slow, or at least slower than usual. We settled on a coffee shop in the next town over. Neutral territory, daytime, plenty of other people around. Totally safe, right? I remember being kinda nervous that day, which was weird for me. I usually go into these things with zero expectations, ready to bail if the guy turned out to be a dud. But Liam seemed different. Smarter, funnier, more genuine maybe? I spent way too long trying to decide what to wear, finally settling on jeans, a t-shirt, and a denim jacket. Casual but cute, like I hadn't tried too hard, even though I definitely had. The coffee shop was exactly what you'd expect. Overpriced lattes, mismatched furniture, and way too many people tapping away on their laptops. I spotted Liam sitting at a table near the window. He looked pretty much like his pictures, maybe a little taller, a little more awkward in person. He had this nervous energy about him, like he wasn't totally comfortable in his own skin, which, for some reason, I found endearing. We ordered our drinks, a black coffee for him, an iced latte for me, and started chatting. The conversation was easy, just like it had been online. We talked about movies, music, books, our families, our hopes and dreams. Okay, maybe not our hopes and dreams, but definitely our favorite albums of the year. He even made me laugh a few times, which is always a good sign. After about an hour, I started to relax. Maybe Hinge wasn't a total scam after all. Maybe I'd actually found someone I could see myself hanging out with, even if it didn't turn into anything romantic. But then, things started to get weird. It started small. He asked me a question about my childhood, and I gave him a pretty standard answer. Then he asked a follow-up question, a little more specific than I expected, and then another one. It was like he was trying to dig deeper, to get to something I wasn't ready to share. I brushed it off, changed the subject, but he kept bringing it back around, like he was obsessed with unlocking some hidden part of my past. Then, he started talking about his ex. I know, major dating faux pas. But it wasn't just a casual mention. He went on and on about how she had wronged him, how she had betrayed him, how he could never trust anyone again. It was intense, uncomfortable, and way too much information for a first date. I tried to be sympathetic, to offer some words of encouragement, but he just kept digging himself deeper into this pit of bitterness and resentment. His gaze flickered with a strange light. The most disturbing of all was the moment he started going through his bag, pulling out a worn photo album. He started flipping through it, showing me pictures of his ex. He told me all about her job, her family, her friends, her favorite vacation spots. It was creepy. It was as if he was trying to force me to care about this person I'd never met. I felt so uncomfortable and told him I had to leave. I made some excuse about a prior commitment, but he didn't seem to believe me. He looked genuinely hurt, like I was the one who had wronged him. As I stood up to leave, he grabbed my arm. Not hard, not aggressively, but enough to make me stop. He looked me in the eye, his expression intense. He said I was different, that I was the only one who understood him, that I couldn't leave him now. I was freaked out. I told him to let go of me, my voice shaking. He hesitated for a moment, then finally released my arm. I practically ran out of the coffee shop, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove home in a daze, replaying the whole thing in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong with Liam. I blocked his number, deleted him from Hinge, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But a few days later, I started getting anonymous messages on social media. Weird, cryptic messages that seemed to be referencing our conversation at the coffee shop. Things that only Liam would know. I freaked out even more. I changed all my privacy settings, made my accounts private, and stopped posting anything online. Then one night, I got a knock on my door. I didn't answer it. I peeked through the blinds and saw Liam standing on my porch. He was holding a bouquet of flowers and had this desperate look on his face. I turned off all the lights and hid in my bedroom, praying he would go away. He stood there for what felt like hours, knocking and calling my name, before finally leaving. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything that had happened, showed them the messages, and described Liam as best as I could. They took my statement, but they said there wasn't much they could do without any evidence of a crime. I was frustrated, scared, and felt totally helpless. I ended up staying at a friend's house for a few weeks, just to feel safe. I never heard from Liam again, but I still think about him sometimes. I still wonder what was really going on in his head. I don't use Hinge anymore, or any dating apps, really. I'm pretty much over the whole dating scene. It's just not worth the risk. Some people are crazy, and they can hide it pretty well. Now I just stick with my friends and family. I guess that's all I'm gonna do. I remember the exact second the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, like a cartoon character sensing danger. It wasn't during some creepy late-night encounter or a shadowy alleyway walk. Nope. It was broad daylight, sipping a latte in a bustling coffee shop, all because of a guy I met on Hinge. I'd been using the app for what felt like forever, wading through the usual mix of gym selfies, generic travel photos, and bios that were painfully unoriginal. Honestly, I was starting to think I'd never find anyone who didn't peak in high school or whose entire personality revolved around craft beer. Then there was Liam. His profile was different. No posed photos, no boasting. Just a few candid shots of him hiking with his dog, playing guitar, and one really goofy picture of him wearing a dinosaur costume at what looked like a charity event. His bio was simple. Looking for someone to explore new places with. Bonus points if you can handle my questionable music taste. It was enough to catch my attention, and after a few witty exchanges, we decided to meet up. Our first date was at a local bookstore, and it was surprisingly normal. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked for hours about everything from our favorite books to our most embarrassing childhood moments. There were no awkward silences, no forced conversations. It just flowed. Over the next few weeks, we went on several more dates. We hiked, went to concerts, and even tried a pottery class, which was a complete disaster, but hilarious. He seemed like a genuinely good guy, and I started to let my guard down. Maybe, just maybe, this Hinge thing could actually work. Then came the coffee shop incident. We were meeting for a quick afternoon coffee before I had to head to work. I arrived a few minutes early and grabbed a table near the window, watching the people go by. Liam showed up shortly after, looking a little flustered. He apologized for being late, saying he had gotten held up at work. I didn't think anything of it, and we ordered our drinks. As we were chatting, I noticed a woman sitting at a table across the room, staring at us. She wasn't just glancing, she was full-on glaring, her eyes narrowed and her jaw clenched. I nudged Liam and whispered, "Do you know that woman? She's giving us the death stare." He glanced over, his face instantly paling. He quickly looked away and said, "No, I don't think so. Maybe she just doesn't like my face." I laughed it off, but he seemed genuinely unnerved. He kept fidgeting in his seat, avoiding eye contact with both me and the woman across the room. The woman wasn't stopping. She still looked bothered by us. The weird woman had dark sunglasses on and wore a hat, so I can't see her hair. She was wearing a white jacket. As we were getting ready to leave, the woman got up and walked towards us. My heart started to pound in my chest. Liam grabbed my hand, his grip tight. The woman stopped right in front of our table, her eyes fixed on Liam. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she said, her voice low and menacing. "Leave him alone," I said, standing up and stepping in front of Liam. "This doesn't concern you," she snapped, her eyes flicking to me for a split second before returning to Liam. "You know what you did. You can't keep running away from it." Liam's face was ashen. He didn't say a word, just stared at the woman with a mixture of fear and guilt. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. The woman let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I think you do. You just don't want to admit it." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She tossed it onto the table in front of Liam and then turned and walked out of the coffee shop, disappearing into the crowd. I watched her go, my mind racing. What the hell just happened? I turned back to Liam, who was still frozen in his seat, staring at the piece of paper. What was that all about? I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just picked up the paper, unfolded it, and read it silently. As he read, his face drained of all color. He looked like he was about to be sick. Liam, what is it? What does it say? I pressed, my anxiety growing with each passing second. He slowly handed me the paper, his hand shaking. It was a photograph of Liam standing next to a young woman. The woman's face was blurred out, but Liam was unmistakable. On the back of the photo, someone had written in large, bold letters, "She knows." I stared at the photo, my mind trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Who was this woman? What did "she knows" mean? And why did Liam look so terrified? Liam, who is this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a deep sadness and regret. I can't explain, he stammered. Just please, trust me. Trust him? After all of this? After the mysterious woman, the cryptic message, the obvious fear in his eyes? There was no way. I think you owe me an explanation, I said, my voice hardening. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and began to speak. He told me about a past relationship, one that had ended badly. He didn't go into specifics, but he implied that he had made some mistakes, hurt someone deeply. The woman in the coffee shop, he said, was connected to that past. She's been following me for months, he said, his voice barely audible, trying to make my life miserable. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wanted to run, to get as far away from Liam and his secrets as possible. But another part of me, the part that had grown to care for him over the past few weeks, wanted to believe him. I decided to give him a chance, to hear him out. Okay, I said, tell me everything. What followed was a long and complicated story about a failed relationship, a broken promise, and a woman scorned. Apparently, Liam had been engaged to the woman in the blurred photograph. He ended up calling off the wedding just weeks before it was supposed to happen after having a fling with another woman. She was angry, hurt, and determined to make him pay. The woman was known as a menace around town. She went around telling people all kinds of lies about Liam. The woman from the coffee shop was a close friend of his ex-fiancée. She had taken it upon herself to harass him, to remind him of his past mistakes. The story sounded plausible, but I still had a lot of questions. Why hadn't he told me about this before? Why had he let me believe that he was this perfect, uncomplicated guy? I was afraid, he admitted. I didn't want to scare you away. I thought if I just ignored her, she would eventually go away. I understood his fear, but I was still angry. He should have been honest with me from the beginning. I need some time to think about all of this, I said, standing up to leave. He didn't try to stop me. I walked out of coffee shop, my head spinning. I didn't know what to do. Was I being overly cautious? Was I being too harsh? I never felt unsafe until that moment when I realized I barely knew the guy I was starting to fall for. I just don't trust people the same anymore. I need to tell someone this story because it's been eating me up for months, and I can't keep it inside anymore. You know how sometimes you make a decision that seems totally fine at the time, but then turns into a full-blown disaster? This is one of those stories, except the disaster involved a Hinge match, a creepy antique store, and a whole lot of regret. Seriously, if I could go back and unswipe, I would. It all started last summer. I was bored, single, and scrolling through Hinge, like you do. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to hang out with and maybe grab some pizza. That's when I stumbled upon Liam's profile. He seemed pretty normal. Good-looking, decent job, liked hiking and indie music, the usual stuff. His prompts were witty, not too try-hard, and his pictures didn't scream serial killer. He also had this kind of artsy, alternative vibe that I found attractive. So I swiped right. We matched pretty quickly, and the conversation flowed easily. He wasn't overly aggressive or weird, just genuinely seemed like a cool guy. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed checking out this antique store a little outside of town. It sounded different, and I was kind of into the idea of doing something other than the standard coffee date. Looking back, maybe I should have paid more attention to the fact that he suggested an antique store, a place that, if you actually thought about it, would be pretty easy to get lost in. But whatever, I was feeling adventurous, and I liked the idea of wandering around a dusty old place with a cute guy. So, the next Saturday, I drove out to meet him. The antique store was even creepier in person than I imagined. It was in this huge, run-down building, and the parking lot was practically empty. The sign outside was faded and barely legible, and the whole place just had this heavy, unsettling feeling. I almost turned around right then and there, but I'd already told Liam I was coming, and I didn't want to flake. Plus, a part of me was still excited to see if he was as cool in person as he seemed online. I found him waiting inside, near the entrance. He was taller than I expected, and he had this intense stare that made me a little uneasy. But he smiled when he saw me, and I tried to brush off my nervousness. The store itself was a maze of narrow aisles packed with all sorts of weird stuff. Old furniture, dusty books, creepy dolls, vintage clothing, you name it. It was like stepping into a time capsule, but time capsule that had been locked away in someone's attic for decades. We started wandering around, making small talk. Liam seemed genuinely interested in the antiques, pointing out different objects and telling me about their history. He knew a lot about old stuff, which I guess was interesting, but also kind of made me feel like he was way older than he actually was. After about an hour of browsing, we ended up in this back corner of a store, which was even more dimly lit and cluttered than the rest. It was filled with old portraits and paintings, most of them covered in dust and cobwebs. That's when things started getting weird. Liam stopped in front of this one painting in particular. It was a portrait of a young woman with long, dark hair and piercing eyes. The painting was old and faded, but there was something about the woman's expression that was unsettling. It felt like she was staring right through me. Liam just stood there, staring at the painting for a long time. He didn't say anything, just stared. It was starting to freak me out. I asked him if he was okay, but he didn't respond. He was like, completely lost in the painting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned to me. His eyes were wide, and his face was pale. He said, "I know her." I was confused. "What do you mean, you know her? She's a painting." He shook his head. "No, I know her. I've seen her before. In my dreams." I tried to laugh it off, thinking he was just messing with me. But he was dead serious. He started telling me about these recurring dreams he'd been having. Dreams about a woman who looked exactly like the one in the painting. He said she would visit him in his sleep, whispering things he couldn't quite understand. I was starting to get really uncomfortable. This guy was clearly not as normal as he seemed on Hinge. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. Plus, a small part of me was still intrigued. We kept walking, and Liam continued to talk about his dreams and his connection to the woman in the painting. He was getting more and more agitated, his voice rising, his eyes darting around. He was starting to scare me. We ended up in this even darker, more secluded section of the store, which was filled with old furniture. Liam stopped in front of this antique mirror. It was huge and ornate, with a heavy, gilded frame. He stared at the mirror for a moment, then turned to me with a strange look in his eyes. He said, "Do you see her?" I looked in the mirror, but all I saw was my own reflection. "See who?" I asked. He pointed at the mirror. "Her, the woman in the painting. She's right behind you." I spun around, but there was nothing there. I was starting to panic. This guy was completely losing it. I needed to get out of there. I told him I had to go, that I wasn't feeling well. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, staring at the mirror, muttering to himself. I practically ran out of the store, jumped in my car, and sped away. I didn't look back. I blocked Liam's number and unmatched him on Hinge. I tried to forget the whole thing ever happened, but I couldn't. For weeks, I had nightmares. I would dream about the woman in the painting, about the antique store, about Liam's crazy stare. I kept seeing his face, those wide, haunted eyes, and I would imagine him in my dreams. Then, about a month later, I was scrolling through the local news website, and I saw a headline that made my blood run cold. Local man arrested in connection with disappearance of antique store owner. The article went on to say that Liam, the guy I met on Hinge, had been arrested after the owner of the antique store went missing. Apparently, he was a suspect in her disappearance. The article also mentioned that Liam had a history of mental illness and had been obsessed with the store for years. I couldn't believe it. The guy I went on a date with was a possible murderer. I haven't used Hinge since. I'm too freaked out. The whole thing was just so bizarre and unsettling. I keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't left the store when I did. What if I had stayed with him longer? What if he had done something to me? It still makes me scared to this day. What he could have done to me. I am not sure how it will end, but I think it is finished. I swear, I used to think those dating app horror stories were just made up for clicks. Like, nobody actually lives that stuff, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. I'm still trying to figure out how I walked straight into a nightmare that started with a simple swipe on Hinge. It's not like I was even looking for anything serious, just someone cool to hang out with. Maybe catch a movie or grab some pizza. I definitely wasn't signing up for the kind of messed up situation that basically turned my life upside down for a while. I'm telling this now because I want to help others avoid the mistakes I made on this dreadful app, Hinge. So there I was, mindlessly scrolling through Hinge one night when I saw his profile. His name was Alex, and his pictures were normal. That was the first thing that caught my attention, honestly. No shirtless gym selfies, no cheesy vacation pics, just regular photos of him smiling, hanging out with friends, playing guitar. He seemed like a pretty down-to-earth kind of guy. His prompts were funny and self-deprecating, nothing too try-hard. He wrote about how his biggest fear was running out of hot sauce, and his go-to karaoke song was Bohemian Rhapsody. I chuckled, swiped right, and we matched almost instantly. Score. We started chatting, and he seemed even cooler than his profile suggested. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything, our favorite movies, our dream jobs, our most embarrassing moments. It felt easy, comfortable, like I'd known him for way longer than a few days. After a week of nonstop texting, he asked me if I wanted to grab coffee. I hesitated for a second, just because meeting someone from a dating app always feels a little weird, but I decided to go for it. What's the worst that could happen, right? Famous last words. We met at a cafe downtown, and he was even more attractive in person. He had this goofy grin and these bright blue eyes that just made me melt a little. The conversation flowed just as easily as it had online. We talked for hours, laughing and joking like old friends. He told me about his job as a software engineer, his love for hiking, and his obsession with vintage video games. I told him about my struggles as a freelance writer, my passion for photography, and my addiction to reality TV. He seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say, which was a nice change from most guys I dated in the past. We ended up walking around the city for a while after coffee, just soaking in the atmosphere and enjoying each other's company. He was charming, funny, and surprisingly thoughtful. He even walked me back to my apartment and gave me a sweet, innocent kiss goodnight. I was hooked. I went home that night with butterflies in my stomach, convinced that I'd finally met someone special. Over the next few weeks, Alex and I became inseparable. We went on dates, cooked each other dinner, and spent countless nights cuddled up on the couch watching movies. He was everything I'd ever wanted in a boyfriend, kind, supportive, and genuinely fun to be around. My friends were even impressed with him, which was a major win. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, this whole dating app thing could actually work out. But then, things started to get strange. It started small at first, little things that I could easily dismiss as coincidences or misunderstandings. Like the time I mentioned wanting to visit a specific museum, and the next day, he showed up at my apartment with tickets, saying he'd gotten them on a whim. Or the time I told him about a childhood dream I had, and he somehow managed to recreate it for my birthday. It was sweet, sure, but also a little unsettling. Then, he started getting possessive. He didn't like it when I went out with my friends without him, and he always wanted to know where I was and who I was with. He started showing up unannounced at my apartment, saying he just wanted to surprise me. I tried to brush it off as him being affectionate, but it felt increasingly suffocating. The biggest red flag came when I started noticing that he seemed to know things about me that I'd never told him. He knew the name of my childhood pet, the street I grew up on, even the password to my old email account. I confronted him about it, and he just laughed it off, saying he was good at guessing and that I was being paranoid. But I knew something was wrong. Something was seriously wrong. I started doing some digging of my own. I did an online search for his name and found a bunch of articles about a guy with the same name who had been accused of stalking his ex-girlfriend. The articles described a pattern of obsessive behavior, including hacking into her social media accounts, tracking her location, and even sending threatening messages to her friends and family. My blood ran cold. I knew I had to get out, but I was terrified. I didn't know what Alex was capable of, and I didn't want to provoke him. I started making plans to leave, packing a bag with essentials, and looking for a new apartment. I changed all my passwords, deactivated my social media accounts, and blocked his number. I felt like I was living in a thriller movie. One night, I came home from work and found my apartment door unlocked. My heart leaped into my throat. I cautiously stepped inside, and that's when I saw him. Alex was sitting on my couch, waiting for me. He smiled, but it wasn't the goofy, charming smile I'd fallen in love with. This was a cold, calculating smile that sent chills down my spine. He knew I was planning to leave. He knew about the new apartment, the packed bag, everything. He said he was disappointed in me, that he thought we were meant to be together, and that I was making a mistake. I tried to stay calm, but I was shaking with fear. I told him that I needed space, that I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, that I just wanted to be friends. He didn't buy it for a second. He stood up and started walking towards me, his eyes burning with anger. I backed away, desperately searching for something, anything, to defend myself with. He cornered me against the wall, his face inches from mine. I thought I was going to die. But then my phone rang. It was my best friend, Sarah. I fumbled for it, desperate for a distraction. Alex hesitated for a moment, giving me just enough time to answer the call. Sarah immediately sensed something was wrong and started asking questions. I mouthed the word help into the phone, hoping she would understand. She did. She stayed on the line, talking to me in a calm, reassuring voice, while subtly calling the police. Alex realized what was happening and tried to grab the phone, but I managed to push him away. He started yelling, calling me names, accusing me of betraying him. The police arrived just a few minutes later. They arrested Alex on the spot, and I never saw him again. He was charged with stalking, harassment, and a whole list of other crimes. I testified against him in court, and he was eventually sentenced to several years in prison. It's been a long time since that happened, but I still have nightmares about it. I'm still terrified of dating apps, and I'm hesitant to trust anyone new. But I'm also grateful to be alive. I learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting your instincts. If you're using Hinge or any other dating app, please be careful. Don't share too much personal information too soon. Meet in public places, and always tell someone where you're going. And if something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Trust your gut, and get out before it's too late. It's not worth the risk. Please do not repeat my mistakes. I got lucky, but maybe others won't. I need to warn others about what happened. Next. Alright, so listen to this. It's a story that'll make you think twice before swiping right again. It all started on Hinge. I know. Everyone says it's the dating app designed to be deleted. But honestly, I was just bored and looking for something to do. I had just moved to a new city for a job, knew absolutely nobody, and my weekends were basically Netflix marathons and ordering way too much takeout. My friends kept bugging me to get back out there, so I caved. Hinge seemed like a decent option. Not as hookup-y as Tinder, not as intense as Bumble. I set up my profile, put up some halfway decent pictures, the ones where you don't look like a total troll, and started swiping. Most of the guys were pretty much the same. Generic bios, gym selfies, holding fish, ugh. Then I stumbled across Ethan's profile. His pictures were different. Not professionally done or anything, just real. He had one of him hiking in the mountains, another playing guitar at what looked like an open mic night, and a goofy one with his dog. His bio was simple. Lover of good coffee, bad puns, and spontaneous adventures. It was enough to pique my interest. We matched pretty quickly, and honestly, the conversation flowed so easily. He was funny, smart, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me, not just trying to get me back to his place. We talked about everything. Our jobs, our families, our favorite movies, the best pizza places in the city. After a week or so of chatting, We decided to meet up for coffee. The coffee date went great. Ethan was exactly as I expected, down to earth, genuine, and easy to talk to. We ended up talking for hours, completely losing track of time. There was definitely a spark there. We made plans to see each other again the following weekend, this time for dinner. The dinner date was even better. We went to this cozy Italian place in my neighborhood, shared a bottle of wine, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. He walked me home afterward, and we kissed goodnight on my doorstep. It was one of those perfect, movie moment kind of kisses. Things progressed pretty quickly after that. We started spending most of our free time together, hiking, going to concerts, exploring the city. It felt like I had finally found someone who really got me. He was attentive, thoughtful, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I was totally falling for him hard. After a couple of months, Ethan started talking about wanting to take things to the next level. He said he was ready for me to meet his family. I was excited, but also a little nervous. Meeting the family is always a big deal. His family lived in a small town about 2 hours away, so we planned a weekend trip. The drive was fun. We sang along to music, told stories, and just enjoyed being together. When we arrived at his parents' house, they were waiting for us on the porch. They seemed nice enough at first. His mom was warm and welcoming, and his dad was quiet but friendly. We had a pretty normal dinner, chatting about work, hobbies, and just getting to know each other. But as the evening wore on, things started to feel off. Ethan's mom kept making these weird, passive-aggressive comments about my job, my clothes, and my living situation. Nothing outright rude, but just little digs that made me feel uncomfortable. His dad just stared at me with this intense, unblinking gaze that made my skin crawl. Ethan didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. He just kept smiling and acting like everything was perfect. After dinner, Ethan's mom insisted on showing me around the house. It was a large, old house filled with antiques and strange, unsettling artwork. As we walked through the halls, she started telling me stories about Ethan's childhood. But they weren't the cute, funny stories you usually hear. They were dark, twisted stories about Ethan's anger issues, his violent tendencies, and his obsession with control. She told me about how he used to torture animals, how he would lock his younger sister in her room for hours, and how he had once threatened to burn down the school. I was horrified. I couldn't believe this was the same Ethan I had been dating for the past few months. I confronted Ethan about it later that night, after his parents had gone to bed. He denied everything. He said his mom was just crazy and that she was trying to ruin our relationship. I wanted to believe him, but the look in his eyes, it was the same look his dad had, cold and empty. We stayed one more night at his parents' house, but I barely slept. I was terrified. I felt like I was trapped in some kind of horror movie. As soon as we got back to the city, I broke up with him. He didn't take it well. He started calling me, texting me, showing up at my apartment. I blocked his number, changed my locks, and even considered getting a restraining order. I started seeing him everywhere, in the grocery store, at the gym, even driving down my street. He never approached me, never said anything, just watched. It was like he was letting me know that he was still there, that he was always watching. One night, I came home from work and found my apartment door unlocked. I cautiously stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The apartment was empty, but everything was slightly out of place. A picture frame was tilted, a book was moved from the shelf, my toothbrush was missing. I knew it was him. He had been inside my apartment. I called the police, but they said there was nothing they could do without any proof. They told me I was probably just being paranoid. I didn't feel safe in my apartment anymore. I started staying at my friend's place. After a few weeks, I decided to move. I found a new apartment in a different neighborhood, a place that Ethan would never be able to find. Or so I thought. A few months later, I was walking home from work when I saw him again. He was standing across the street, watching me. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knows they have you right where they want you. That's when I realized I had made a huge mistake. I had let a stranger into my life, someone who was hiding a dark and twisted secret. I had ignored the red flags, dismissed my instincts, and put myself in danger. I had no idea what he was capable of, but I knew that I had to get away. I packed my bags, left the city, and never looked back. I still don't know if he's still out there, watching, waiting. But I'll never forget the face of the guy from Hinge, who almost ruined my life. I was lucky to get out. I just wish I knew the danger I was in until it was too late. Okay, so check this out. I downloaded Hinge because, honestly, I was bored out of my skull during summer break. All my friends were either working or on vacation, and I was stuck at home with nothing but Netflix and my mom nagging me about getting a real job. Hinge felt like less pressure than Tinder, you know? Like it was supposed to be for actual relationships or something. And the first few weeks were pretty chill. I matched with a couple of guys, had some decent conversations, but nothing really clicked. Most of them were just looking for a quick hookup, and that wasn't really my thing. I was hoping for something, anything, that felt a little more real. And then I matched with Liam. His profile was different from the start. Instead of the usual shirtless gym selfies, he had pictures of himself hiking, volunteering at an animal shelter, and reading a book in a coffee shop. He seemed genuinely interesting, and his prompts were actually funny and thoughtful. We started chatting, and it turned out we had a lot in common. We both loved indie music, old movies, and going to art museums. He was a couple of years older than me, a recent college grad working as a graphic designer. He seemed smart, funny, and genuinely kind. Honestly, I was kind of smitten. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested going to this quirky little bookstore cafe downtown. It sounded perfect. I spent way too long trying to figure out what to wear, wanting to look cute, but not like I was trying too hard. When I finally met him, he was even better in person. He was tall, with messy brown hair and these really kind eyes. We ended up talking for hours, just laughing and sharing stories. It felt like I'd known him forever. We started seeing each other pretty regularly after that. We went to concerts, explored new restaurants, and even had a picnic in the park. Everything felt so easy and natural. He was always so attentive and thoughtful, remembering little details I'd mentioned in passing and surprising me with thoughtful gifts. He was exactly the kind of guy I'd always imagined dating, and I couldn't believe how lucky I was to have met him. But then, a few weeks into the relationship, things started to get a little weird. Small things at first, things I could easily brush off as coincidences or overthinking. Like, he always seemed to know where I was, even when I hadn't told him. If I mentioned grabbing coffee with a friend, he'd randomly show up at the same cafe, saying he just happened to be in the area. Or he'd text me at the exact moment I was thinking about him, as if he could read my mind. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence, that he was just really into me. But the coincidences kept piling up, and they started to feel less like coincidences and more like something else. He also started getting weirdly possessive. If I mentioned hanging out with other friends, especially guy friends, he'd get really quiet and withdrawn. He'd ask a lot of questions, wanting to know exactly what we did, what we talked about. He wasn't outwardly jealous or angry, but there was this underlying tension, this subtle pressure to reassure him that he was the only one I cared about. One day, I was scrolling through Instagram and saw a picture of Liam with another girl. It was an old picture from a couple of years ago, but it still stung. I didn't recognize the girl, but they looked really close, like they were more than just friends. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was in the past and that everyone has a history. But the picture kept replaying in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling me. That night, I decided to confront him about it. We were at his apartment, watching a movie, when I casually brought up the Instagram picture. He got really defensive, saying it was just an old friend and that there was nothing to worry about. But he wouldn't tell me who she was or what happened between them. He just kept saying it was in the past and that it didn't matter anymore. I didn't believe him. His evasiveness only made me more suspicious. I decided to do some digging of my own. I started searching for him online, looking for any clues about his past. I found his old Facebook profile, which he hadn't used in years. There were pictures of him with the same girl from the Instagram picture, and they looked really happy together. Their relationship status said, in a relationship from a few years back. I kept scrolling, trying to find out what happened between them. And then I found it. An article from the local newspaper about a missing person case. The girl in the pictures, her name was Sarah, had disappeared without a trace a few years ago. The article said the police suspected foul play, but they never found any evidence. I felt like my blood ran cold. Could Liam have had something to do with her disappearance? I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to believe that Liam was a good person, that he wouldn't hurt anyone. But the evidence was starting to pile up, and I couldn't ignore my gut feeling anymore. I knew I had to get out of there, to get away from him. I made an excuse about having to go home, saying I had an early morning appointment. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't try to stop me. As I was leaving, he gave me a hug and whispered in my ear, "I'm so glad I found you." His words sent a chill down my spine. I ran out of his apartment and didn't stop running until I was safely inside my own home. I locked all the doors and windows and barricaded myself in my bedroom. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop thinking about Liam and Sarah and the possibility that I was dating a murderer. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything about the coincidences, the possessiveness, the Instagram picture, the missing person case. They took my statement seriously and said they would look into it. They asked me to stay away from Liam and to contact them immediately if he tried to reach me. The police questioned Liam, but they couldn't find any concrete evidence to connect him to Sarah's disappearance. They kept him under surveillance, but he didn't do anything suspicious. Eventually, they had to let him go. But I knew, deep down, that he was guilty. I knew he had done something to Sarah, and I was terrified that he might do something to me too. I changed my number, moved to a new apartment, and started going by a different name. I cut off contact with all my old friends and family, fearing that Liam might try to find me through them. I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was watching me. Years have passed since then, and I still haven't heard from Liam. But I know he's out there somewhere, and I'll never truly feel safe again. All because of a Hinge match that seemed so promising at first. Next. Super bored on a random Tuesday night, scrolling through Hinge, because what else is there to do, you know? I'm in my small town, literally nothing to do, and everyone I know is either married, moved away, or still living in their mom's basement, which, honestly, respect. Anyway, I stumble across this profile, Liam, and immediately I'm like, okay, wow. He's got that effortlessly cool vibe, like he just rolled out of bed looking like he's ready for a magazine shoot. His pictures were all outdoorsy, hiking, camping, and one of him playing guitar around a campfire. I'm a sucker for that stuff. His bio was funny too. Something about being a professional overthinker who enjoys long walks to the fridge. I sent him a like, not really expecting anything. But then he matched, and that's when things started getting weird. We chatted for a few days, and he seemed normal enough. Maybe even a little too good to be true. He was smart, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked about everything: music, movies, our families, our hopes and dreams. He said he lived in the next town over, about an hour away, and that he came from a big family. He was working as a carpenter, which I thought was cool. Something about building things with his hands. He said he'd only been on Hinge for a week and was looking for something real, which, I admit, made me swoon a little. After a week of chatting, he suggested we meet up. He said he knew this great little coffee shop halfway between our towns, kind of out in the country. I was hesitant at first. I mean, meeting someone from the internet? It's always a gamble. But he seemed so genuine, and I was tired of being alone. Plus, the coffee shop sounded cute, and I really wanted to get out of my town for a while. So I agreed. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours trying to decide what to wear, agonizing over every little detail. I ended up going with a simple pair of jeans and a t-shirt, trying to look casual but cute. I drove to the coffee shop, which was even more adorable than I imagined, all rustic wood and twinkle lights. I got there a little early and ordered a latte, trying to calm my nerves. Liam arrived about 15 minutes later, and he looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He had this easy smile and kind eyes, and he gave me a hug that made me feel instantly comfortable. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told me more about his family, his job, and his passion for woodworking. He even brought me a small wooden carving he'd made, a tiny hummingbird. It was so thoughtful and sweet. As the sun started to set, he suggested we go for a walk. There was a trail that led through the woods behind the coffee shop, and he said it was beautiful at sunset. I hesitated for a moment, but again, I felt comfortable around him, and the idea of walking through the woods sounded romantic. So I said yes. The trail was beautiful, all dappled sunlight and rustling leaves. We walked hand in hand, talking and laughing. He told me about a project he was working on, building a treehouse for his niece and nephew. He seemed so normal, so kind, so perfect. Then he stopped walking. He turned to me, his expression suddenly serious. He took both of my hands in his, and he said, "There's something I need to tell you." My heart started pounding. I don't know why, but I had a bad feeling. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm not who you think I am." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He let go of my hands and took a step back. "My name isn't Liam, and I don't live in the next town over." My stomach dropped. "Who are you then?" He hesitated for a moment, then said, "My name is Caleb." Caleb? It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. He continued, "I live about 3 hours from here. And I've been watching you for a while." Watching me? What was he talking about? "I saw your profile on Hinge," he said, "and I knew I had to meet you. I created a fake profile, using someone else's pictures. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I felt like we were meant to be together." My mind was reeling. This couldn't be happening. This was like something out of a movie. You're lying," I stammered. He shook his head. "I'm not. Everything I told you about myself was a lie. Except that I really do care about you. I know it sounds crazy, but I felt a connection with you, even before we met. I knew that if I just met you, you'd feel it too." I took a step back, away from him. "You're insane," I said. He reached out to me, but I flinched away. "Please," he said, "just listen to me. I know I messed up, but I can make it up to you. Just give me a chance." I shook my head, tears welling up in my eyes. "Stay away from me," I said. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, back through the woods, back to the coffee shop. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I locked the doors and started the engine, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I drove away as fast as I could, not knowing if he was following me, not caring. I just needed to get away. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything. They took my statement, but they said there wasn't much they could do since he hadn't actually threatened me. They told me to block him on Hinge and to call them if he contacted me again. I drove home, a shell of my former self. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the whole thing in my head, trying to make sense of it. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted someone so easily? The next day, I deleted Hinge. I deleted all my social media accounts. I didn't want to be found. I didn't want him to find me. I moved back in with my parents, needing the safety and security of home. I spent weeks hiding, afraid to go outside, afraid to answer the phone. Eventually, I started to feel a little better. I got a new job, started seeing a therapist. I started to heal. But I'll never forget what happened that day. I'll never forget Liam, or rather Caleb. I'll never trust someone from the internet again. The hummingbird carving he gave me is still in a box somewhere. I don't think I can bring myself to throw it away. It's a reminder of the person I almost fell for, and the person that never truly existed. It's a small piece of the horror of that day. I think of it every time I try and do something outside of my comfort zone, and I wonder if the risk is truly worth it. I don't think I'll ever use dating apps again. Okay, so I never thought I'd be one of those people with a dating app horror story. I always figured I was too level-headed, too aware, to fall for anything seriously messed up. But life, as they say, finds a way to humble you. I guess I should preface this by saying I was in a really vulnerable place when this happened. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, like 5 years, and I felt totally lost. I didn't know who I was outside of being someone's girlfriend. My friends were all partnered up, and I was suddenly facing this terrifying void of singlehood. So naturally, I downloaded Bumble. I swiped through profiles for days, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. There were the obvious creeps, The guys with shirtless photos and bios that read like a laundry list of demands. But then there was Liam. His profile was different. No post photos, just candid shots of him hiking, playing guitar, and volunteering at an animal shelter. His bio was short and sweet. Looking for someone to explore the world with. Bonus points if you like dogs and bad jokes. He seemed genuine, down to earth, and attractive in a nerdy cute kind of way. I swiped right. We matched almost instantly, and he messaged me first. Our conversations were easy and engaging. He asked about my interests, my job, my favorite books. He actually listened to my answers, instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. We bonded over our shared love of indie music, hiking, and rescuing stray animals. He seemed like the perfect antidote to my post-breakup blues. After a week of chatting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I was hesitant at first. I hadn't been on a date in years, and the thought of putting myself out there again terrified me. But Liam was so charming and persistent that I eventually caved. We agreed to meet at a local coffee shop on a Saturday morning. The date started off great. Liam was even more attractive in person, and his personality was just as warm and engaging as it had been online. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, laughing and sharing stories. He even brought me a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked that morning. It was cheesy, but in a genuinely sweet way. I felt like I was finally starting to relax and enjoy myself again. But then, about halfway through the date, things started to get weird. He started asking me really personal questions, like about my past relationships, my insecurities, and my biggest fears. I brushed it off at first, assuming he was just trying to get to know me better. But the questions kept coming, each one more probing and invasive than the last. He wanted to know every detail of my breakup, every mistake I had made, every regret I harbored. I started to feel uncomfortable, like I was being interrogated rather than romanced. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he kept circling back to my personal life. He seemed almost obsessed with my vulnerabilities. After coffee, Liam suggested we go for a walk in a nearby park. I hesitated, but I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. Plus, the sun was shining, and the park was full of people. I figured I'd be safe enough. As we walked, Liam started talking about his own past. He told me about his difficult childhood, his struggles with depression, and his failed relationships. He painted himself as a victim, someone who had been hurt and betrayed by everyone he had ever loved. I felt sympathy for him, but also a growing sense of unease. He seemed to be trying to manipulate me, to guilt me into feeling sorry for him. We reached a secluded area of the park, away from the crowds. Liam stopped walking and turned to face me. He took my hands in his and looked me directly in the eyes. "I feel like we have a real connection," he said, his voice low and intense. "I feel like you understand me in a way that no one else ever has." I tried to pull my hands away, but he held on tight. "I need you," he said, his grip tightening. "I need you to be there for me, to support me, to love me unconditionally." I was starting to panic. This wasn't just a bad date. It was something else entirely. "Liam, I don't think this is a good idea," I said, my voice trembling. "I think we should just be friends." His eyes flashed with anger. "Friends," he spat. "I don't want to be friends. I want more than that. I deserve more than that." He leaned in close, his face inches from mine. "I know you feel it too," he whispered. "I know you want me just as much as I want you." I pushed him away with all my strength and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road. I flagged down a taxi and gave the driver my address, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. When I got home, I locked all the doors and windows and collapsed on the couch, sobbing. I felt violated, scared, and stupid. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let myself get into such a dangerous situation? I blocked Liam on Bumble and deleted the app from my phone. I didn't leave my apartment for days. I was afraid he would find me, that he would come after me. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I started getting strange phone calls. The caller ID was always blocked, and when I answered, there was no one there. Just silence, followed by a click. I ignored the calls at first, assuming they were just telemarketers. But they kept coming, multiple times a day, every day. Then, I started getting emails. They were anonymous, with no subject line and no message. Just blank emails sent from random, disposable accounts. I reported the emails to my internet provider, but they couldn't trace the sender. The phone calls and emails continued for months, slowly chipping away at my sanity. I felt like I was being stalked, like someone was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. One night, I was walking home from work when I saw him. He was standing across the street, in the shadows, watching me. It was Liam. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. He smiled a slow, unsettling smile that sent shivers down my spine. He didn't say anything, just stood there, staring at me. I turned and ran, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't look back. I ran all the way home, locked myself in my apartment, and called the police. The police took my statement, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. They advised me to get a restraining order, but I was afraid that would only provoke him further. I started taking self-defense classes, carrying pepper spray, and varying my routes to and from work. I lived in a constant state of anxiety, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering when he would strike again. Eventually, the phone calls and emails stopped. I started to relax, to breathe a little easier. I told myself that he had moved on, that he had found someone else to obsess over. But I never truly felt safe again. Years have passed since that first date with Liam, but the experience still haunts me. I'm more cautious now, more guarded. I don't trust easily, and I'm always wary of strangers. I still use dating apps occasionally, but I'm much more selective about who I match with. I've learned that appearances can be deceiving, and that the people who seem the most charming and genuine can sometimes be the most dangerous. This whole experience taught me that online dating can be incredibly risky, and that you need to be extra careful about who you trust. It's important to listen to your instincts, to set boundaries, and to prioritize your safety above all else. I was lucky. I survived my dating app horror story, but not everyone is so fortunate. I hope that by sharing my experience, I can help someone else avoid a similar fate. I still think about Liam sometimes, wondering where he is, what he's doing. I hope he's getting help, that he's no longer a threat to himself or others. But deep down, I know that some people are just broken beyond repair, and the best thing you can do is protect yourself from them.